I will now call this meeting to order at 5 o'clock on November 6th. And we will start with the land acknowledgement statement, and it's being read by myself this evening. The shirt I'm wearing tonight is No More Stolen Sisters, and there's a reason for that. My cousin's daughter has been missing from and I'll get this wrong, it's Michigan on Manitoulin since October 2nd. And they're going to do a total search on Manitoulin this weekend, looking for her and hoping they find something. So that has brought this whole thing very close to home for me. The second part of my acknowledgement tonight, I'll read first the land acknowledgement and then I have a second part. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge with respect the history, spirituality, and culture of the Anishinaabe, the people of the Three Fires, known as Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi Nation, who have inhabited this land from time immemorial, and further give thanks to the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash, now known as Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of this land. We also recognize the Métis and Inuit, whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. May we all, as treaty people, live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship with all its diverse peoples. At a recent meeting of the Board of Health Directors, Kevin Eccles, the mayor of West Grey, asked Nick Saunders, our representative from Nawash or Neoshiniming, what we should or could be doing to support the needs of the Indigenous community. And Nick is a wonderful addition to the membership of the Board of Health. His words are always extremely thoughtful, and as chair, I have learned to wait for him to tell me when he has finished speaking. Too often, any pause in conversation is taken as an opportunity to jump in with our words and thoughts. With Nick, there are pauses as he searches for the correct words to say, and his words are always words that the other board members need to pause and think about. In answer to Kevin's question, he compared our journey toward reconciliation to one where we need to become like small children who need to crawl before they walk and walk before they learn to talk, and that each step is important and cannot be hurried. And when we learn to talk, we must then make sure to use our words wisely. This is a journey of healing that we're on. And in Nick's words, we are only at the toddler stage. He also said that it would start with one voice and will end with many speaking the same words. It will take a community to reach healing. I appreciate his perspective. This is a journey that we must all walk together thoughtfully, with respect and understanding the need to use our words wisely. Thank you. I'll move on to approval of the agenda. We have one item added to the agenda. So the recommendation is that discussion regarding the South Bruce Peninsula Georgian Bluffs launch of Gwen Lamont's memoir, The View from Coffin Ridge, be added to the agenda as circulated to council, and that the agenda be approved as amended. Before I call for a mover and seconder, are there any other additions to the agenda this evening? Seeing none, I will ask for a mover and seconder that. Oh, Councillor Thompson, go ahead.
It's not an addition to the agenda, but I just noted I think we've got a typo in the date in our next meeting. I just didn't want to miss that before we move too fast. I think our agenda has at the bottom, next
14th,
meeting
it
is
should be
the 14th. It should be the 13th. Yep, that was all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Coburn?
And also not an addition to the agenda, but just to let council and folks listening in know that I may have to leave the meeting early tonight to attend a visitation.
Thank you. Okay, could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Day? Deputy Mayor Pringle? Is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Does any member have a declaration of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, you may declare it any time throughout the meeting if one should arise. Minutes of previous meetings. The recommendation is that the minutes of the council meeting held on October 16th, 2024 be adopted. Could we have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Winters, Councillor Schuldeis, is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Does any member or staff wish to make an announcement? I'm wondering if we could announce about tomorrow night's public meeting, which is for the, is that not tomorrow night, the Community Improvement Plan?
So you, Mayor Colton, yes, indeed. Tomorrow night is the public open house for our Community Improvement Plan between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. in here. Anyone will be welcome to join to find out more about what Community Improvement Plan is and learn about what's in our draft.
Thank you. And the other item that I would like to bring forward is to express sympathy and condolences to the family of Alan Fisher. Alan actually served the township as a fence viewer for a period of years and also sat on 3 different remuneration committees. So I would just like to express our sympathy to that whole family at this time. Is there anyone else? Okay, moving on. We have no public hearings. Delegations or public question period. For 8.1 items on the agenda, any person who wishes to appear before council regarding an item on the agenda shall make written application to the clerk by 3 p.m. the day of the meeting. To register, go to www.georgianbluffs.ca/delegations or call the clerk's office at 519-376-2729 extension 603. And we have no delegations there. For items on the agenda, it's the same thing, only register by the Thursday prior to the meeting. And this evening, we have Tim Lanthier from Grace Sable Conservation Authority with the 2025 draft budget and administration center renovation. So I first have a recommendation here that the 2025 draft Grace Sable Conservation Authority budget presentation be received and that procedure bylaw 2019-125 be waived to allow the delegation to exceed the 10-minute presentation allotment. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Coburn, Councillor Schuldeis. I will call the vote. No, I won't do that yet. We'll listen to the presentation. Go ahead, Tim, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and thank you, Council. It's great to be here, see everybody again. I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you. I am here to talk to you tonight about our draft 2025 budget, as well as proposed upcoming changes to our administrative center. I want to lead off with a little thing to note that you are my 5th council that I'm talking to since Monday, so my voice is starting to get a bit scratchy, so I do apologize if it breaks on me. Slide, please. Thank you so much. So very high level, what I'd like to go over is some of the highlights from 2024 as they relate to the entire watershed area. Some of the highlights from 2024 as they relate specifically to Georgian Bluffs. A look at our draft 2025 budget at a high level, as well as how that's changing from 2024, what that means on a taxpayer level, and then what some of the things we're looking forward to in 2025. I do have the admin center on that slide, as I was originally planning to lump them into one presentation, but it'll actually be the next. So as you may be aware, in 2024, we started to undertake our 10-year strategic plan. And because of the guardrails that we have set on us by the legislation that we operate under, we did actually take the opportunity to set our goals in advance of doing public consultation with the end goal of making sure that the comments that we received were relevant to the work that we actually do. And so we are most of the way through that process right now, but you can see on the screen the strategic goals that our board has set for the organization. Notably, one of the changes is that we do have a new strategic goal of working towards achieving organizational excellence for Grace Sable Conservation. So some of the highlights in 2024 were that we did, as I mentioned, work on that 10-year strategic plan. We hope to have that wrapped up in the first quarter of 2025. We, as a step towards achieving organizational excellence, we did a complete overhaul of our personnel policy that is in excess of 20 years old at this time. And we look at that as an excellent tool to be able to provide better service to our staff without having to spend a lot of money to do it. So looking for alternate ways to improve the culture within the organization. And I'm happy to say that with the exception of one policy still outstanding, our board has approved those effective last month or earlier, late October. There, through the Conservation Authorities Act changes that happened over the last couple of years, there are a slew of new requirements for conservation authorities to undertake, a number of strategies. And so two of these that are listed there, the watershed-based resource management strategy and the conservation areas strategy, are out for consultation right now, just until the end of the week. It was a relatively short consultation period, but I do encourage you to take a look at those and provide any comments that you may have. We're hoping to have those wrapped up by the end of the year. But anyway, a suite of documents that we had to prepare due to changes in the regulation, and that kept staff quite busy. We launched a new environmental education program for the organization in 2024 with funding from the Grace Sauble Conservation Foundation as one of the primary funders. And this program targets curriculum-based learning for school-aged kids throughout the entirety of the school system, so whether all the way from early elementary grades through high school. We transitioned to a new development regulation, so you'll be familiar with the fact that we have development regulations, and the province took the opportunity through changes to the Conservation Authorities Act to amalgamate those for all 36 conservation authorities into one, and our staff have been working through the process of adjusting to that new regulation. And then we continued with our library loan program, which I just want to bring to your attention. So you'll probably be aware that we charge for parking at some of our more popular parking areas throughout the watershed. And this has been really successful for the Conservation Authority. We raise almost $300,000 a year in paid parking, and this directly offsets what would otherwise be levied to support those programs. So really, really positive for the organization, really positive for our member municipalities. And to keep this affordable for local residents, we offer what we call a membership pass. So for $45, people that live within our watershed municipalities can purchase a membership pass and go to these properties all year round. Recognizing that even at $45, that could be a financial barrier to some people, we give some passes to all of the libraries within the watershed so that people can go to the library and book out a pass the same way they would take out a book. And I just think it's important to bring that to your attention. We're really proud of that program, and the uptake from our libraries has been really good. So some of the highlights specific to Georgian Bluffs, and again, this is highlights, this isn't everything we've done in the municipality over the year, but we did plant or distribute over 7,000 trees within the township. So we have a tree planting program that is voluntary, so landowners come to us to get properties planted. But we also offer the ability for people to come to us to buy trees in bulk in the spring. So we have the ability to get grant funding, and we also have the ability to work with nurseries to bring those trees in en masse. And that's been very, very popular throughout the watershed. We completed managed forest plans for 7 different landowners for almost 400 acres of forest throughout Georgian Bluffs. And you're probably familiar with the Sawmill Ski Trails in Hepworth. So that is a Grace Sauble property. And in the wintertime, it's a very, very popular ski club. The Bruce Ski Club operates out of there, very, very popular. We've been working with a mountain bike group to offer the same sort of experience in the summertime for mountain biking. So we're still hammering that out and what it's going to look like, but I think it's really fantastic that we'll have a 4-season recreational use there that's hitting some things that we maybe can't find other places in the watershed. We hosted, now when I wrote this, I hadn't seen the numbers yet. So I said we hosted 150,000 visitors to Georgian Bluffs, but it turns out Inglis Falls alone saw over 150,000 visitors this year. So when we start to look at places like Indian Falls and Jones's Falls just up the road here, and all of the other fantastic properties that we have within the township, I'd hazard a guess that we host at least 200,000 people within Georgian Bluffs alone. So we're not the only tourism driver in the municipality by any stretch, but we like to think that we're a key piece of the puzzle in bringing people to Georgian Bluffs and affording green space for the people who live here. We had recently done a strategic management plan for Inglis Falls, and we're taking action on that. So we've started to improve the wayfinding signage through Inglis Falls. We completed over 80 planning and permit reviews to mid-October, just within the township. So quite busy that way. And then as you can see here, we have 12 stream sample locations for water quality to keep an eye on the environmental integrity of the watershed, specifically as Georgian Bluffs, and 19 gauge locations that help us judge rainfall, flood forecasting, and things of that nature. And then through our stewardship program, we installed 100 feet of water diversion. So this is essentially eaves trough on barns to keep water out of the paddock areas so that it doesn't flow through manure before making its way to the streams, and helps agricultural producers install 225 acres of cover crop. So at a very high level, shifting gears here a bit to our actual budget, in 2025, the draft budget is just over $4 million, so $4.14 million. This is only about $6,000 difference total dollar value than our 2024 budget. So things are staying pretty static. With this, we offer vital watershed services across an area extending from the Collingwood Blue Mountains border all the way to Lake Huron, and then south to about Tara and Feversham, respectively, across the southern border, serving 8 member municipalities. When we look at the funding model, and I know I've talked to you guys about this before, but I'd like to reiterate, is when Conservation Authority started, it was a partnership between the province and the municipalities. The province has stepped back quite substantially from that partnership. We now receive about 6.5% of our funding from the province. Most of that is drinking water source protection, which is not part of that original 50%. So 1% of that original 50 remains. But to fill that gap, Grace Auble has taken great strides to increase self-generated revenues. And so currently our self-generated revenues cover over 50% of the budget. The remainder is made up by municipal levy, split across 8 member municipalities. So when we look at the difference between the 2024 budget and the 2025 budget, we are proposing an increase in levy. And so you'll remember me talking hopefully about the mandatory program in category 1 and the non-mandatory program in category 3. And so we do differentiate those types of levy in the budget now. About $89,000 is projected as an increase in category 1 or mandatory service levy across 8 member municipalities, and about $3,700 increase in this category 3 or non-mandatory programs. So the change is largely driven by 3 things this year. One is the inevitability of operating costs increasing year over year. 2 is a reduction of about $68,000 in self-generated revenue. And that stems largely from our planning department. We did a review of fees a few years ago, and we're not realizing quite the revenues that we hoped we would see. And so we are projecting that those revenues will be slightly lower next year. And then the third major component here is that we have been offsetting levy with reserve and surplus, and we're hoping to start to move away from that to make the budget more sustainable in the long term. Any costs associated with the admin center are not included in this iteration of the budget. We'll talk about those in the next presentation, and those will be included in the November iteration of our budget. So when we look at the levy across the watershed, this is what it looks like for everybody, and Georgian Bluffs is highlighted here. So we're proposing an $8,600 increase in levy for the township. And the way this is divided out is through modified current value assessment. So the province sends us numbers about what the assessed value of property is in each municipality that's within our jurisdiction. And then it's modified by the percentage of that municipality. So for Georgian Bluffs, 100% of the municipality is in the watershed, so it's not modified. But for Erin Eldersley, say, to the south of us, it's about 50% within our watershed, 50% within Saugmeans. So we would only look at 50% of that. So I like to just use this as an example to explain how that levy really breaks out. So every municipality is levied the same amount per $1,000. Some municipalities have higher assessed values than others. So if we look at Erin Eldersley again as an example, the assessed value of total property is much lower than the Blue Mountains within our watershed, who has very high assessed values of property. But that cost per 1,000 remains the same. So in 2025, it's projected to be just shy of 11.5 cents per $1,000. And so as an example to, provide some context to this, a house assessed at $650,000, and I chose that number because that's the average price of a house in Great Bruce, right? That would be just under $75 per household per year in levy for Great Salt. And that's up from last year by about $1.93 per household per year. That's not specifically how levy works, but that's just an easy way to think about that cost per thousand. So as we move into 2025, some of the areas of focus for us are, as I mentioned, we're hoping to wrap up our 10-year strategic plan early in the new year. We hope to tackle the renovation of our administration center, and I'll plan to talk about that shortly. We're going to continue to invest in the visitor experience at our properties. Our properties are a big part of the business that we do, and we think that it's a big part of both life in Grey County Grey and Bruce counties to be able to have access to those wonderful green spaces, but also a really important reason why people come to the area, not just for our properties, but for that natural experience that we have to offer in this part of the world. We plan to continue to develop our Watershed Guardians program, which is our environmental education program. We are looking for sponsors for that. So if you know any community members or corporations in the community that see value in environmental education and may be interested in partnering, please send them our way or reach out to us directly on that. We have a plan this year to distribute another 50,000 to 80,000 trees throughout the watershed. We plan to renew our planning agreements with our member municipalities to recognize changes to Conservation Authorities Act that took place in 2023. And we have plans to undertake updates to flood mapping in some of our flood damage centers and to carry out further upgrades to some of our flood and erosion infrastructure. So primarily the Clendenin Dam in the town of Blue Mountains, which stops sheet ice from going into the village of Clarksburg. So in terms of next steps, the Conservation Authorities Act requires that we give 30 days notice to municipalities, so circulate our budget for a minimum of 30 days. We like to give you a lot more time than that if we can help it. So our board approved the budget for circulation at the October board meeting. It will be going back to the November board meeting, but as I noted earlier, we're planning to put the capital cost of the administrative center into the budget at that time and then recirculate. It will come back to the board in January for final approval. The reason we broke those out is to make sure that we could have very clear conversations about what is normal standard operating and capital budget and what is associated specifically with the administrative center renewal. And so with that, Your Worship, I thank everyone for their time and I welcome any questions or comments that council may have.
Thank you very much, Tim. I will turn to council. Any questions? Councillor Coburn?
I'm sorry to ask you to go back and explain it again, but the decrease in revenue, can you run that by me one more time? Why are we experiencing such a significant decrease on the revenue side?
Sure. So in maybe two years ago, we went through a fees review with Watson and Associates, and they established what the fees should be for planning applications. And it's a little bit of crystal balling. So we look back at historic planning application numbers, planning and permit numbers, and we try to project into the future that those will continue a similar trend and that we should expect to see X revenue based on that. We're not experiencing the revenue that we hope to see from that. And so as opposed to running the organization into a deficit because of that, we're projecting that that will be reduced and taking appropriate action to do so. Now we're countering that on the expenses side by we have a vacancy in the planning department right now, and we're choosing not to fill that in 2025 to help balance that side of the budget.
And if I may have a second question, happy to see the number of trees that you're helping to distribute and get planted throughout the municipality. On the flip side of that, how many trees are you planning on cutting down in 2025?
I don't have a number on that. So we will have forest operations in some of our properties. We have a projected revenue of $50,000 from forest harvest. But it's important to remember that our forest harvests are done in an ecologically sustainable way. And we actually start with, in often cases, we've started with a bare field that's been put into a plantation, and it'll be turned into a completely mixed forest within a 100-year time frame, which is substantially faster than a forest would ever do on its own.
Any other questions? Seeing none, did you want to move into the next section then, Tim?
So yeah, so thank you for listening to the presentation on this too. Let's wait for that. So this is a project that we're very excited about. So we are hoping to renovate our administration center. It has it's been with us for 50 years now, and it's showing its age, and it's time for us to take action to deal with that. So the administration center is located in the township of Georgian Bluffs. I'm sure that most of you are probably familiar with its location, where it is and what it looks like. This diagram is just an overhead shot of the administration center. The octagon, the gray octagon that you see in the middle of the drawing, is our office building. And the protrusions that exist on that from the southeast, southwest, northeast, and northwest corners are all existing. So we're not proposing to change the exterior of this structure, with the exception of a small addition out the northeast corner, which is under 500 square feet. So currently the public entrance to the building is on the southwest corner, up a steep ramp or an awkward flight of stairs. They're beside each other. And in the back is where we're proposing the new front, and I'll show you that in a second. So a little bit of background on the building. The building was built in the mid-70s, so it's coming up on 50 years old now. It has, it's certainly received maintenance over those years, but it hasn't received any substantial investment or renovation in that time. And so some of the issues that we're dealing with are issues that probably weren't apparent or of issue in the 1970s when it was built. So we have layout issues because our staffing has grown over that time. There are noise issues in terms of disruption to staff trying to work in the building because, again, there are more staff in there. All of the offices are essentially open air. There's no ceilings on any of the offices. And this was an issue for us pre-COVID. Post-COVID, where so many people are having Teams meetings, Zoom meetings, and things like that, it's become a much substantially larger issue. We're also finding that the IT infrastructure is rather hodgepodge because there was no IT infrastructure in the 1970s, and the HVAC and the electrical systems are also in need of replacement. So we started this process in late 2018 by going to the board of directors at that time and getting money put into the capital budget to start with schematic design to see where do we go from here. Internal changes with a changeover in leadership within the organization, followed quickly by a global pandemic, forced us to bench this project for a little while. We picked it up again in 2022, and since that time we've had approval from the board to move through concept design, schematic design, detailed design, which we just finished up this summer, and now the board has approved moving forward with construction drawings for the renovation. So that's the phase that we're currently in. We did go through a Class B costing estimate at the 50% detailed design stage, and it came back substantially higher than we'd hoped. And we worked with the architects and with the cost consultant to reduce that by 27%. So before we get into the details on that costing, some of the things that we wanted to address, or we do want to address through this renovation, are to make the building fully accessible, AODA compliant. We want to improve the public reception area so that it's functional and inviting so that we can better serve our clientele. We want to renew the interior for staff comfort and use, as mentioned, reduce noise, reduce glare. The glare is an unusual one. It's an interesting building if you've been in it. It was architecturally designed originally. There's a beautiful skylight in the ceiling, but that's only beautiful when the sun's not directly in your face as in your office. So that is something that the architect will be looking at dealing with too. The original plan was to make it more energy efficient, but we had to step back from that when we looked at, as I said, we're not touching the envelope of the building. We're not planning to replace the windows and the building is probably 60% windows on the exterior side. So we thought there's no point investing money in the small areas of walls if we're not going to change out all those windows. And then we do need to address some ongoing issues that keep coming up with the roof and the skylight. So when we talk about accessibility, as I mentioned, the front of the building is becoming the back, and the back of the building is becoming the front. It's an octagon, and there are entrances on 4 sides right now. 3 of those sides have large mounds of earth that you have to traverse up to get to the doors. The current rear of the building does not. And it also happens to outlet onto our primary larger parking lot, access the pavilion, the arboretum, and the network of trails. So what we decided to do was put an at-grade addition on that side of the building that'll allow people to enter from the parking lot without any barriers, and then have a lift that can take people up or down. You'll note, if you haven't been to the building from the pictures, that it's a split level. So you have to go upstairs to get to either floor in the building. So from an overhead perspective, this is what it looks like and how it connects to that parking lot on the right side of the image into the building with no barriers in place in the new iteration. And closer up, you can see, moving from the left side of this drawing to the right, about halfway through, you see 2 dark gray walls on either side. Those are existing walls, and where the walls start to converge towards each other, that is the new addition. So the addition itself is quite small. It's 490 square feet or so. It allows for a vestibule and then that entrance into the at-grade portion. And there's a lift in this section that would allow people to access both floors. The other thing it does is, in the image on the left right now, you see the current entrance to the building. It's dark, it's truncated, and it doesn't allow us to provide great customer service. In the image on the right, which is obviously a 3D rendering that the architects have done, the building is much brighter, it's fully accessible, and then within the existing structure of the building, if you look back in that drawing, you can see the reception desk, so that people can come into the office, they can get the service that they need in an adequate way. There's also a room within this space to tell a bit of the story about the Conservation Authority and the work we do, because what we have found is we have many facets to the work that we do, and it's hard for the public to understand all of that work. The other thing this is going to afford us to do is have space to meet with the public as they come in essentially off the street, but typically they're coming from a municipal office to see us because they've been asked to. And this will allow staff to have places to take them off to the side and meet with them. When I talk about improved workspaces, the building, the image on the left shows our current building. And so we certainly have space for our staff, but the space is ineffectively used and it's very disruptive. All the staff are sort of disruptive to each other in their work if any meetings are going on at all, because there are no roofs or doors on any of the offices, and a lot of them are cubicles. In the revised iteration of the office, we'll compartmentalize our program areas such that, I'll use planning as an example, all of the planners will be in a certain part of the building, and that part of the building will be closed off from the other parts of the building. So if they're having meetings, they may be hearing each other, but they won't be disrupted by the rest of the staff and vice versa. And then individual managers will have offices so that confidential and private business can be conducted without having to book a meeting, the one meeting room that we have every time. Same thing for our boardroom. So on the right-hand side, the left-hand side rather here, you see a room in which our board meets. Staff have to pass through this room to get in and out of the office. And again, it's a conflict of uses and an inefficient use of the space. On the right, you see the floor plan for the lower level. The office, or the room with the 12 on it, is the new boardroom, which would be set to the back of the building by itself, has an adjacent meeting room to it with an accordion door. So when the board is in session, we can open that and the public or staff can be there. And when it's not, it affords us 2 isolated meeting rooms. So the obvious question is, what's it going to cost and how are we going to fund it? So as I mentioned earlier, we did a Class B cost estimate and it came back to us at $3.6 million. To provide some perspective there, when we did our schematic design, we had an order of magnitude provided to us by the architects. And that order of magnitude came back at 1.5 million. So when we saw 3.6 million, our response was, we can't do it. This is not feasible, and we can't roll forward with this project this way. We worked with the cost consultant, the architect, and we were able to scale that back to 2.6 million. So there are some further decimals, and that's about $950,000 that we cut out of the project. We were able to do that in 3 ways. One was to talk to our municipal partners about similar projects they had done recently and the contingencies that they used, and then reduce our contingency within a reasonable amount to match that. 2 was to look at some of the portions of the project that we have a better understanding from quotes of what the price should be than what the cost consultant provided, and reduce those accordingly. And then the third thing was to scale back the project. So looking at some of the fixtures and finishes and change those so that we could reduce the cost of the overall project. So there's 3 reasons also that it went up from that 1.5 million. So the first being time. Time passed from when we started to when we got to this point, and the cost of construction and materials has gone up. But the other thing is that through working with the mechanical engineers, we learned that we would have to do substantial work on the HVAC system. Now we're fortunate that the geothermal heat pumps that we have in place are newer, and they still have 10 to 15 years life in them, so those will be remaining. But the ductwork needs to be redone. When the building was built in the 70s, the basement or the lower level was a bit of an afterthought, similar to the way people sometimes build their houses. And the ductwork is not adequate to that part of the building, so we need to improve that. The electrical system is surpassed its useful life. So the panel that our electrical system goes into, you can't buy them anymore. You can't service them, so we need to replace that. And because of the changes to the office, they do need to change most of the electrical, and then obviously the IT servicing. So when we consider ancillary costs, the rental of a space while we're having the renovation done, furniture and fixtures for the office, and the remainder of the professional fees, it brings us up to about $3 million. We have money in reserves to cover about $800,000 or $900,000 of this, and as we get closer to project start, we'll have a better handle on what that number actually is. But that means that the remaining amount needs to be borrowed and amortized over a period. So last year around this time, we brought some rough costs to our board of directors, and following that meeting, we went out and met with senior staff, so CAOs and treasury staff at all of our member municipalities. We had a discussion, a frank discussion about what the costs are, and a frank discussion about what is reasonable from a staff perspective, not committing to anything, but what is reasonable versus what is completely out to lunch in terms of a cost to bring forward. Based on those numbers from each of our municipalities, when we got the cost estimate, we looked at those numbers and compared them against an amortization and tried to keep the amortization as short as we could without exceeding those numbers we received from our municipal partners, so that we could balance what is reasonable with not throwing money away at interest rates by extending the amortization period longer than it has to be. So the Conservation Authorities Act stipulates that any borrowing like this and levying through municipalities is done the same way as our regular levy, so that modified current value assessment. And then when we look at this across all of our municipalities, it works out to about $24,000 a year for the township. And so again, through you, your worship, I thank everyone for the time, and I welcome any questions and comments that council may have.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim. And I will turn to council to see if there are any questions. Councillor Colburn.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Carlton, to Tim. So $24,000 annually for 15 years?
Correct.
Any further questions? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor Carlton. Yeah, just the concerning part for me on the whole process right now, Tim, is that it's going to cost us $3 million, and we haven't looked at any work on the outside of the building. There's probably no way that those limbs will last another 15 years. I just, me thinking out kind of loud on this, but I'm thinking we're going to spend $3 million to really get what we wanted of the inside of the building. We haven't addressed what's gonna happen to the exterior of the building. And then we'd be right back to the same position again here in 15, if we can get to the 15 years. That's a concerning piece for me, I guess. I just not sure where this will lead to down the road, right? Windows don't last forever. They're already 50 years old, right? You're gonna have 65-year, wherever they've been updated in that time. Okay, so even still, do you figure they'll last 15 years, those windows? So they're good for more than 15 years?
Yeah, so the windows, we don't see any issues with the windows right now. Most of them are non-operational windows, so they don't open and close. They're static and fixed. And we've checked out all the brickwork and the foundation work around the building and don't see any signs of any sort of failure at all at this point. So we're relatively confident that no work is required on those portions of the building. I was a little remiss, I guess I should have mentioned that one thing proposed to the outside of the building is the skylight and the roof. So that will be addressed.
Right.
But the remainder of the building seems to be in very good shape right now. So we don't see any need to replace those windows at this point. Unfortunately, I can't say what that lifespan remaining in them is.
Oh, thanks, Ron.
Similar to those thoughts through you, Mayor, to Tim there, and great presentation. I appreciate the work Conservation Authority does. When I look at that building and I watch what happened here at Georgian Bluffs, where they said, okay, here's an existing building. We're going to anticipate our growth in the next 5-10 years. And before you hit that period of time, you've already outgrown that building. I didn't hear anything about staffing requirements. Yes, you've taken that existing building, you've modified it so it meets your today needs. What about growth? Are we going to be out of space in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road? Are we looking at once you commit, you're committed. And that's really where I'm not trying to set you up, but I'm committed that once we start throwing money at it, we're going to continue to throw money at it. And as I remember back in the day when we went to the Niagara Escarpment Commission about the Inglis Falls Road, the first thing I said is, why is it here? Why do you need it? Is that the best location? Is that the best functionality for the Conservation Authority? Does that serve all of your member municipalities? Just a question about a little bit of history of why it's there, why you think it should continue to be there, and does it meet your needs moving forward in the next growth period, right?
Right, absolutely. I can't answer for sure why it's there. So the authority used to have its office pre-mid-70s downtown Owen Sound, I believe in an old house or something like that. They chose this spot, I presume, because it offered sufficient space not far from where they were already situated on a property that was already owned by the Conservation Authority to set up shop. So when we look at, does it make sense for it to be there? Well, now it does for sure, because the infrastructure is there, our works building is there, the parking infrastructure, septic, all of that is there. So even if we chose to move somewhere else, we would have the cost of moving somewhere else, but we would still have to do something with this building. So from the perspective of does it make sense to stay there, we've given that some thought, and I think, yes, it does. When we started the process in 2018, the board had asked the question about, does it make sense to build new, or does it make sense to reinvest in this building? And we started to investigate that, but since the change in construction prices, there's no way we're building new for $2.6 million. It's just not going to happen. So then when we think about growth, we're not projecting any sort of exponential growth within the organization. It would be much smaller growth than that. And the building, as it's designed in the iteration that's been provided to us by the architects, has room for about 6 to 8 additional staff at proper offices and desks, as well as floating workstations. So pretty comfortable from that perspective, as in terms of balancing what we perceive to be future growth with not building something for the sake of building it, with no knowing what's going to happen in the future.
It is a very nice location of the property, and don't get me wrong, but I mean, financially, you have to look at it and say, wait a minute, the Ministry of Natural Resources, the Ministry of the Environment and Energy, the Niagara Escarpment Commission, the OPP, none of them own a building. They're all long-term leases. And financially for the municipalities, is a long-term lease a better option than continuing to invest in something that we own. I get that it's got other functions and that building will always be there and there'll be some money. But I'm just wondering, has there been any sort of financial background look into what does a long-term 20-year, 30-year lease in a commercial building look like for an annual? I mean, it's all about money to taxpayers. You hit it on your head when you said, hey, parking passes is hard for some individuals. Here we are talking $24,000 for 15 years. There's going to be other pressures that we as a municipality are going to have to face. Just wondering if that's ever been looked at, right? So tough questions. I don't mean to say.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
When I look at $24,000 for 15 years, that's a commitment to Georgian Bluffs. It's minor compared to some of your other municipalities, I get that, but as an overall picture, does it make sense, more financially sensible to look at a long-term lease with growth potential?
Yeah, and I can certainly bring that back to the board of directors.
Thank you. Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton, and I just wanted to add my voice to that. I did wonder about leasing too. We have, for example, the health unit building, which may or may not be full now, but it has been largely significantly empty at times. Beautiful, relatively new building. I would also like to see that option explored.
Yeah, so we did look at the health unit building because it actually sits on property that's owned by the Grace Level Conservation Authority, and we lease it to them long term. But they are full, or they're full enough that they can't handle our staff.
I know that sometimes organizations have two sites, a satellite site, so some of the staff might be in one location while others are maybe due with the original site. Just something to know.
Any other comments? Are there any questions from staff?
From a broader perspective, what do other conservation authorities in Ontario have for buildings to, I don't have a strong opinion at this particular point in time, but just the standard across the province for spaces that people can visit and different conservation authorities?
I wish I could give you a straight answer on that. It ranges from very small Catfish Creek down south of London that is operating out of an old farmhouse to Toronto Region Conservation that has just built, I believe, the largest stick frame lumber office building in the province, and then everything in between. Yeah, so I don't have a straight answer really across the board. There's 36 conservation authorities, and they have varying types of buildings and sites.
Okay, not seeing anything else, I would call the vote now. Does anyone want me to read that recommendation again? Okay, so recommendation is that the 2025 draft Grace Sawville Conservation Authority budget presentation be received and that procedure bylaw 2019-125 be waived to allow the delegation to exceed the 10-minute presentation allotment. So we have a mover and a seconder. If there's no more discussion, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you very much.
Lori, for
Appreciate
being
it.
here this evening. Okay. Moving on to consent agenda. Are there any items that anyone wishes to pull? Seeing none, then, sorry.
It's 9.3.5, Side Beach.
Anything else? Seeing none, then the recommendation is that Council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs adopt the consent agenda for information as circulated, less item 9.3.5, and that all items contained therein are hereby approved. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Coburn, Councillor Winters. Is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. So, Deputy Mayor Pringle, over to you for 9.3.5.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Carlton. I just thought when I went through the consent agenda there, the town of Saga Beach putting in kind of a motion here to the OPP board on what their asks are for funding going forward again too. And I'm sorry, Samantha's not here tonight, but we had quite a substantial increase too for our OPP costs here in the township too, or been put forward to us, and they're asking for a 5% limit to the OPP cost moving forward. And I just thought that was something maybe we should be throwing our support behind and give them the letter of support on that scenario, just to again, the amount of money that's being asked of us as a township goes up every year, and I think if we can put a barrier or a top number of 5% moving forward, that gives us a little more, we know where we're at to and so forth. But I think it's going to be a lot more. A lot of other townships are a lot higher than even us, but ours is high enough too. I just thought it was a good way for us to support the town of Saga Beach, to put it out there that we should be trying to cap it out at 5% and go from there. So that's what it was all about. Just offered a letter of support to Townsville
Okay.
Design Beach.
Just as a question, and I'm not sure, Councillor Coburn, you're on the new police services board, or Brittany, you're involved. Has that come back in front of that board
No,
at all?
the board, I'm sorry, through your chair. The board has not yet met. We have insurance now,
I saw
so we
that.
are able to start meeting. However, our board members are required to complete training prior to us holding a meeting. So I'm very hopeful that we will get to have a meeting prior to the end of the year. And this will come back as part of their budgets.
Okay, and second then would be, I thought they had a webinar that they were proposing to do around that budget, and then they pulled that one at the last minute. Do we know any more about that?
No more than it was canceled.
Okay, so what Deputy Mayor Pringle is asking is that we send a letter of support for this. Is there any more comments or such from the rest of council? Okay, so we would need, are we copying exactly the resolution that's there or just sending support?
I think the ask was just for support to them, so
Okay.
whether we copy that one or.
It's quite a lengthy one, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah. There's a couple other things here they're asking for a feasible study, so I think if we send a letter of support, we should be good.
Okay, I'm looking to.
Through you, Mayor Carlton, yeah, so we can pass a resolution in support to direct staff to submit that letter of support. And essentially, we just append this correspondence to it, so the entire context is included with the correspondence that comes from our council.
Okay, thank you. So mover and seconder? Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Coburn. There's no other discussion. I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thanks. So we have no correspondence. We're on to committee reports. So from Committee of the Whole, the recommendation is that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held on October 23rd, 2024 be adopted, including recommendations COW 2023-104 to COW 2023-110. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Can I just ask a question before we go on? Are those COW 2023s or should they be 2024s? Because they were passed on October 23rd. That's where we got confused. So reword that to 2024 in both cases. So mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Winters, Councillor Scholdice. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor. And that is carried. Thank you. That takes us to staff reports. So corporate services. Recommendation is that council proceed with option 2 as described in report COR 2024-041 herein, and that staff be directed to author a follow-up report that outlines the program framework in detail in the form of an amended draft volunteer recognition policy for consideration of council. Bit of a mover and a seconder. Councillor Day, Councillor Thompson, and am I going to you, clerk, to discuss? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton, for you. So this report is a follow-up to direction provided to investigate alternatives to our existing policy. As noted in the report, council has amended the policy each year, suggesting that there may be some additional wiggle room in the policy to make it more effective. So as a result, we are recommending that the policy be revised to preserve the intent of the policy in the categories that exist today, but reduce the frequency of award presentation and formalize the award presentation into a volunteer community event. So under the recommended option, the awards would be considered once per term, probably in the middle of the council term, with all 3 awards being given at that ceremony. We feel that a volunteer community event would serve the benefit of bringing community volunteers together to celebrate contributions to the community from all areas of the township. and that there's benefits as other volunteers who are nominated and guests of nominees who may also volunteer would also be invited to that event to partake and celebrate community volunteers on a wider scale across the township. Moving to this option does not mean that you can't recognize volunteer contributions on an annual basis. The report does outline provincial programs that exist that we can submit nominations for and award in council chambers as well. So at this time, I'm just seeking some direction on the future of the program desired amendments. I have recommended an option, and if supported, I could bring back a full framework as mentioned. Alternatively, I'm open to whatever feedback you have on the future of the policy. And although I did not include it in the policy, you always have the option to continue with the program as it exists by simply voting down the recommendation and maintaining status quo. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, thank you. I will turn to council for any comments. Councillor Coburn, go ahead.
Thank you. And through you to our clerk, I think it's great what you've done and what you've suggested, and I think the amendments that you're proposing will work better for us in the future. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Deputy Mayor Pringle.
Yeah, thanks, Mark Earl. Yeah, I'm along with Councillor Coburn on this here too. I did originally look at option 1, but looking at option 2 here is where the clerk has suggested we go here too. It gives us everything we need to do what we want to do, I do believe. So I'm good with option 2.
Okay, anyone else? So as a question then, because the suggestion is to do it in a second year of the term of council, we would not be doing another one this term. We would be waiting till next term. Is that the idea? Okay. Seeing no other comments, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Moving on to bylaws. There's no zoning bylaws, other bylaws. We have bylaw 2024-053, the fee waiver policy. The recommendation is that bylaw 2024-053, being a bylaw to adopt the fee waiver policy for the corporation of the Township of Georgian Bluffs, be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Winters, Deputy Mayor Pringle. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Next item is bylaw 2024-054, amendments to donation policy. The recommendation is that bylaw 2024-054, being a bylaw to adopt an amended donation policy for the corporation of the Township of Georgian Bluffs, be read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Scholdice, is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? And that is carried. Next item, bylaw 2024-055, Hutton land transfer. The recommendation that bylaw 2024-055, being a bylaw to authorize the stopping up, closing, and transfer of a public highway in the geographic township of Derby, be read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Coburn, Councillor Day, is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? Is carried. We have no unfinished business. New business, the first item, and perhaps we'll have some discussion on this one before I read the recommendation. It has to do with Remembrance Day ceremonies and who on council will attend where. So any volunteers for any specific ones? Councillor Day.
I will politely and respectfully decline this year since it's on a school day and we'll be honoring the day in another format.
Okay. Councillor Thompson, did I see your hand up?
No, it wasn't up. I was just scratching my eye, but I was going to put my hand up.
Sorry.
Unfortunately, I'm not going to be here, so I'm not able to support putting a wreath out this year, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Pringle.
I'll go to chat if anybody else wants to chat.
Okay, go ahead.
I was going to suggest that I could go to On Sound this year, unless that was.
No, you're good. I was just gonna say, I did Shadow Lake last year, and Epworth as well, and if there's anybody else who wants to step up and go there this time, I'm happy to do that, but I would love to go to both of those, for sure.
Okay. So that leaves us with Tara and Wyerton.
I graciously have to decline just for.
Okay, and that's fine, okay. I can do either. I would say it's normally traditional for the mayor to go to On Sound, but if Councillor Coburn wants to do that one, then
So which ones are left?
Tara, Wyerton, you said On Sound. They normally ask the mayor to go, don't
I
ask me
didn't-
why.
I did not realize that.
Okay.
Apologies. I'm happy to do Tara.
Okay. Okay, so we're leaving Wyerton out.
Through you, Mayor Carlton, I'd be more than happy to attend Whiten if council would like.
So, let me read this out then. The recommendation is that the following members of council attend the following local Remembrance Day ceremonies on behalf of the township. Owen Sound Legion, Mayor Carlton, Tara Legion, Councillor Coburn, Shallow Lake Hepworth Legion, Councillor Scholdice, Wyerton Legion, CAO Lobley, Chatsworth Legion, Deputy Mayor Pringle, and that the aforementioned members be remunerated per the existing council remuneration policy for their attendance. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Scholdice, Councillor Day, is there any further discussion? Councillor Day.
Are we, sorry, not me, as I'm declining this year, is the idea the same as last year where a donation would be made by those who are remunerated?
That's a personal choice of everyone, whether they submit for it or not, or whether they submit for that remuneration and then donate it to the Legion that they intend to. I think that's a personal choice. Councillor Coburn?
I do not feel comfortable at all accepting payment to attend a Remembrance Day ceremony. And I don't know how appropriate it is to say to people, you can or you can't, rather than recommend an amendment to the motion to say that we'll waive the policy, the remuneration policy for Remembrance Day for this year and attend without being paid. I just think of all of the events that we attend to give thanks and to give back. To me personally, it just doesn't feel right to be paid to attend. That's just my own personal opinion.
Deputy Mayor Pringle.
Yeah, thanks, Margaret. Yeah, and I totally am 100% agreement with Councillor Colburn here. I have never put in for here. It's just a due respect kind of thing. Now that you mentioned the piece of donating back to the Legion is always a big part of it, but I do that on my own. So I just, these people gave their lives for us. So I don't feel we need to be paid.
Okay, so we need a amendment to that motion then.
I would move that it be amended to remove the remuneration and state rather that we're waiving the policy for this one so that we're not being remunerated.
Okay, and a seconder on that. Deputy Mayor? Okay, so I will call the vote on the amendment first. All in favor? That is carried, and then back to the main motion. I will call the vote on that unless there's further discussion there. All in favor? And that is carried. Okay, and the next item I am going to turn over to Councillor Day. It's the additional item we put on the View from Coffin Ridge, the South Bruce Georgian Bluffs Memoir Launch Event Invitation. Councillor Day.
Absolutely. The View from Coffin Ridge is perhaps a misleading title as it's only part of the title. The main part might be more considered a childhood exhumed, where the author writes about her childhood and experience as a child bride and then a tumultuous and dangerous first marriage. So the memoir touches on themes of intimate partner violence and members of councils are invited, as well as members of organizations who support people who are in intimate relationships where there is violence. And a donation will also be given to both the Salvation Army and the Blue Water Outdoor Education Center at the end of this event. It's at the Colboys Bay Women's Institute. The author will be there speaking. There will be a Q&A, and we have a complimentary ticket that one of us could take. If nobody else would like it, then I will be attending. But if someone else would like to go, then I would be very happy to give the ticket to another member of council.
Thank you. I am not able to attend that one, so is anyone else on council interested in attending that? I think the invitation was forwarded to everyone. Is this one where we need to give any direction or not, or this is, Councillor Day is volunteering to go on this one?
I'm happy to follow up with the event organizers.
Okay. Then I would suggest perhaps we leave it at that, and do we need a motion then? Thank you for bringing that forward. Does any member wish to provide a notice of motion this evening? Seeing none, we will now move into closed session. So the recommendation that Council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs move into closed session at 6:05 p.m. in the council chambers with the CAO and clerk remaining in the room to discuss 18.1 personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, open meeting exemption B of section 239(2) of the Municipal Act 2001, Ontario Volunteer Service Awards nomination. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Coburn, Councillor Schuldeis. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. We are now in closed session. Are we ready to go again here? Okay. Council went into closed session under open meeting exemption B of section 239(2) of the Municipal Act 2001. As a result of closed session discussions, direction was provided to staff. I will now read the confirming bylaw. The recommendation that bylaw number 2024-056, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council on November 6, 2024, be read a first, second, and third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Schultes, Councillor Thompson. Is there any discussion? Call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Date of the next regular meeting, next Tuesday at 9 a.m. here and Wednesday evening on the 13th at 5 p.m. here. If there's no other business, I will now call for adjournment of this meeting. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Winters and Councillor Day. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you, everyone. Good evening.